What if everything the modern wellness industry is selling you right now? The supplements, the powders, the $14 cold-pressed juice cleanses was already sitting in a book written thousands of years ago. Here is something that almost nobody talks about. The foods described in biblical scripture are not just religious symbols. They are nutritional weapons, and researchers are now running clinical trials that keep arriving at the same jaw-dropping conclusion. Ancient people knew exactly what they were doing. Today we are going to walk through 10 foods that appear directly in biblical text and show you, with real science, why each one is a healing powerhouse that most of the modern world has completely forgotten about. Stay with me through this entire list, because number 4 was so medicinally powerful that the ancient Egyptians cataloged it in over 20 separate medical preparations. And number 9 was given as a luxury gift by a patriarch to an Egyptian ruler. A gift, not grain, not gold, this specific food. And once you find out what it is and what it does to your cardiovascular system, you will completely understand why. All right, let us get into it. Number 10, dates, the original energy bar that kept armies alive. Let us start here because dates are probably the most underestimated food in this entire list. The date palm is referenced more times across biblical and ancient Middle Eastern scripture than almost any other fruit-bearing tree. And it was not celebrated because it was pretty. It was celebrated because it kept people alive in some of the most brutal climates on Earth. Think about this. Soldiers crossing desert terrain. Traders covering hundreds of miles on foot. Pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem for feast days. What did they carry? Dates. Calorie-dense, shelf-stable for months without refrigeration, and packed with rapid-absorbing natural sugars that refuel the body without the crash that follows refined sugar. But here is what makes dates medically interesting. Beyond just being a fast fuel source, they contain meaningful amounts of magnesium, potassium, copper, manganese, and B vitamins, all in a single piece of food. You can hold in your palm. The fiber content slows the absorption of those natural sugars enough that the glycemic response is far gentler than eating the equivalent amount of refined sweetener. Clinical research has found something remarkable about dates and pregnancy specifically. Multiple controlled trials have shown that women who ate dates regularly in the final weeks of pregnancy experienced significantly shorter labor times and had better cervical dilation outcomes at admission. Ancient midwives across the region prescribed dates for exactly this reason. Modern obstetrics is now catching up to what they already knew. The polyphenols and tannins in dates also carry antimicrobial properties. The pits were ground into powder and used in traditional Arabic medicine for gastrointestinal infections. Even the part most people throw away was being used therapeutically. Traditional use is simple. 3 to 5 dates as a quick energy source before physical work or travel. A natural sweetener in cooking and baking, and a gentle way to break a fast, which is precisely why they have been used to end the Ramadan fast for centuries. The body absorbs them after a long period without food in a way that is smooth, not jarring. This is not a trendy superfood. This is a survival food with a clinical record going back thousands of years. Number 9, pistachios. The nut, a patriarch, considered worthy of a king. Here is a moment from Genesis that most people skip right over. When Jacob sends his sons to Egypt during a devastating famine to negotiate with an official who holds the entire region's grain supply, he tells them to bring gifts, and pistachios make the list. Genesis chapter 43, verse 11. Read that again slowly. A man negotiating for his family's survival during a regional famine chooses pistachios as something worth offering to an Egyptian ruler. That tells you everything about how these nuts were valued in the ancient world. They were not a snack. They were currency-grade nutrition. And modern science confirms that the valuation was justified. Pistachios are unique among nuts in their concentration of lutein and zeaxanthin, 2 carotenoids that are the primary protective compounds for the macula of the eye. Regular pistachio consumption is now directly linked to reduced risk of age-related macular degeneration, one of the leading causes of blindness in the developed world. They contain more potassium per serving than most other nuts, which directly supports blood pressure regulation. Their essential amino acid profile is unusually complete for a plant food, making them a powerful complementary protein source in a diet that does not center on meat. But what genuinely surprises researchers is what pistachios do to the gut. Clinical studies have shown that regular pistachio consumption significantly increases populations of beneficial bacteria in the colon, particularly bifidobacterium strains, more effectively than most other nuts that have been tested. Before anyone had a word for the microbiome, Jacob's household was eating one of its most powerful supporters as a prestige food. Their cell wall structure also means that the fat inside pistachios is not fully absorbed during digestion. Some of it passes through intact and feeds bacteria instead of being stored. This is why they provide more satiety and fewer net calories than their label implies. Traditional use, eaten as they are, raw or lightly roasted, as a daily nutrient source. Ground into pastes for cooking. Pressed for oil used on the skin. Jacob understood value. We should treat pistachios the same way he did. Number 8, barley. The grain of ordinary people that outperforms everything. Barley is not glamorous, it never was. In the ancient world, it was the grain of soldiers on campaign, sailors at sea, and common laborers who could not afford wheat. When Jesus fed 5,000 people with loaves and fish in the Gospel of John, those loaves were made from barley. This was the bread of the everyday person. And it turns out the everyday person was eating one of the most cardiovascular protective grains ever studied. Barley contains the highest concentration of a fiber called beta-glucan found in any grain on Earth. And beta-glucan is not a minor nutritional footnote. The FDA has formally approved a health claim for food products containing it because the research is that strong. Beta-glucan forms a thick gel inside the digestive tract that does several things simultaneously. It slows glucose absorption after a meal, dramatically flattening blood sugar spikes. It binds to LDL cholesterol and carries it out of the body before it can be reabsorbed. It feeds beneficial gut bacteria, and it actively stimulates immune cell activity. Clinical comparisons between barley and oats, already considered one of the gold standard heart-healthy grains, consistently show barley outperforming oats in post-meal blood sugar response. Barley has a lower glycemic index than wheat or white rice. It provides sustained, stable energy over hours rather than the fast spike and crash that refined grains produce. For a grain that costs almost nothing, grows in nearly any climate, and has been cultivated for over 10,000 years, the nutritional return is extraordinary. Traditional preparation was whole grain barley cooked as a thick porridge, ground into flatbread, or added to stews. Hulled barley retains more of its fiber and nutrients than pearled barley, though even the pearled version remains one of the better carbohydrate sources available. The people who ate this grain as their daily staple were not settling for second best. They were eating something that modern nutritional science keeps returning to with increasing admiration. Number 7. Pomegranate, the antioxidant that decorated Solomon's temple. The pillars of Solomon's temple were decorated with 200 carved pomegranates. This was not random aesthetic choice in a culture where every design element carried meaning. The pomegranate was a symbol of abundance, beauty, and life throughout Mosaic law and ancient Israelite culture. And the science behind why this fruit earned that status is genuinely remarkable. Pomegranates contain a compound called punicalagin that exists in almost no other food source on Earth. When the gut processes punicalagin, it breaks it down into compounds called urolithins. And these are where modern research is focusing intense attention. Urolithins have shown anti-inflammatory effects, mitochondrial protective properties, and in laboratory studies, demonstrated the ability to selectively target certain cancer cell lines in ways that researchers describe as significant. Clinical trials using pomegranate juice have shown measurable reductions in blood pressure, lower oxidation of LDL cholesterol, improved arterial flexibility, and reduced levels of C-reactive protein, one of the primary blood markers for systemic inflammation. The polyphenol concentration in pomegranates outranks red wine, green tea, and blueberries, 3 foods that are practically synonymous with antioxidant research. The seeds and juice provide the primary nutritional value, But the rind, which almost everyone in the modern world discards without thinking, is even more medically concentrated than the edible interior. Traditional healers across the Middle East brewed pomegranate rind as a tea for treating intestinal infections, diarrhea, and inflammatory gut conditions. That same rind is now being studied for its antimicrobial tannin content. Traditional use: eat the seeds fresh, directly from the fruit. Drink fresh pressed juice for concentrated polyphenol intake. Dry the rind and steep it as a medicinal tea for gut health. The whole fruit provides what supplements and extracts attempt to replicate. Use the whole fruit. Number 6. Garlic, the food the Israelites wept over. This may be the most emotionally charged food reference in all of Scripture. When the Israelites are wandering in the wilderness, surviving only on manna, they reach a breaking point. They weep. And what do they say they miss? Numbers chapter 11, verse 5. The fish of Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. They missed garlic so intensely that grown adults, having just been delivered from slavery, were mourning its absence in the desert. If you understand what garlic actually does to the human body, their grief becomes completely rational. When garlic is crushed or chopped, a compound called allicin is produced through an enzymatic reaction. Allicin is one of the broadest spectrum natural antimicrobials ever identified. It has demonstrated activity against bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites in clinical research. It is not targeting one pathogen, it disrupts multiple microbial pathways simultaneously, which is part of why resistance is so difficult for microorganisms to develop against it. Controlled clinical trials show regular garlic consumption reduces both the frequency and the duration of colds and respiratory infections. Multiple studies confirm it lowers blood pressure and LDL cholesterol to clinically meaningful degrees. It reduces platelet aggregation, making blood less prone to dangerous clotting. And it has documented liver protective effects, supporting the detoxification enzymes that process and eliminate harmful compounds from the body. The key detail is this: allicin is volatile. Heat destroys it. Raw, freshly crushed garlic is dramatically more potent medicinally than cooked garlic. The ancient world ate it both ways, raw in preserved condiments and dressings, and cooked into stews. But the raw preparation was the medicinal one. Egyptian medical papyri from thousands of years ago list garlic in more than 20 separate medical recipes. The Israelites who wept for it were not being dramatic. They knew by direct experience what life felt like with it and what it felt like without it. Number 5, figs, the prescription that saved a king. Here is a detail that most people read past, without pausing to think about what it actually means. In 2 Kings, when King Hezekiah is dying from a severe infectious wound, the prophet Isaiah does not only pray, he gives a medical instruction. He orders a compress of figs pressed directly onto the wound, and Hezekiah recovers. For centuries, this was treated as either metaphor or coincidence. Then researchers began analyzing figs seriously and found that Isaiah's prescription had a precise biochemical rationale. Figs contain a proteolytic enzyme called ficin that breaks down dead and damaged tissue, cleaning a wound from the inside out. They also contain compounds called psoralins and benzaldehyde with documented antimicrobial properties. Fresh fig latex, the white sticky substance that comes from the skin of an unripe fig, has been shown in studies to inhibit bacterial growth and accelerate the early stages of skin healing. But figs are not just for wound care. As an internal food, they are one of the most mineral-dense fruits you can eat. They are extraordinarily rich in soluble fiber, specifically pectin, that feeds and diversifies the beneficial bacteria in the gut. They contain magnesium, potassium, calcium, and B vitamins in concentrations that made them, in a world without multivitamins, something close to a daily supplement. Fresh figs eaten at peak ripeness provide fast-absorbing energy alongside that mineral payload. Dried figs extend that nutrition through seasons when fresh fruit was unavailable, and the ancient practice of applying mashed fresh figs to inflamed or infected skin is one that deserves far more modern clinical investigation than it has received so far. Isaiah did not guess. He prescribed, and the prescription worked. Number 4, onions. The prebiotic king that paid the pyramid builders. Onions appear right alongside garlic in the great wilderness lament of Numbers chapter 11. And their presence in that list of mourned foods was not accidental. Onions were not a flavoring. They were a food group. Here is a historical detail that puts their value into sharp context. Egyptian laborers who built the pyramids were partially paid in onions and garlic, not given them as a bonus, paid in them as part of their wages. When a civilization building the largest structures in human history pays its workers in a food, that food is not optional nutrition. It is foundational, and science tells us exactly why. Onions are among the richest dietary sources of quercetin, a polyphenol with anti-inflammatory, antihistamine, and antioxidant effects that has been studied in hundreds of clinical trials. Research shows quercetin measurably reduces blood pressure, inhibits the inflammatory signaling pathways involved in chronic disease, and reduces allergic response by stabilizing mast cells. But the less celebrated superpower of onions is their prebiotic fiber content. Onions are loaded with inulin-type fructans, specific fibers that pass through the small intestine undigested and arrive in the colon, where they selectively feed bifidobacterium and lactobacillus bacteria. These are the foundational strains of a healthy gut ecosystem. The ancient Israelite diet was built around garlic, onions, and leeks daily. Every single one of these is a member of the allium family, and every single one is rich in these prebiotic compounds. Without ever having a word for the microbiome, this culture was eating in a way that systematically built and maintained one. The sulfur compounds in onions also support liver detoxification enzymes, helping the body process and eliminate environmental toxins more efficiently. Raw onions in salads and pickled preparations deliver the maximum quercetin dose. Cooked onions and virtually everything else provide sustained prebiotic fiber. These are not supporting players. They are the foundation. Number 3, raw honey. Heaven's antimicrobial. Honey and milk flow under your tongue. Song of Solomon. Eat honey, for it is good. Proverbs. The Bible does not casually mention foods this many times. Raw honey is referenced across Scripture as a food that gives strength, clarity, and healing. And the reason is not poetry, it is biochemistry. Raw honey is one of the most comprehensively studied natural antimicrobials in the scientific literature. Clinical research has confirmed it can kill antibiotic-resistant bacteria, including MRSA strains that defeat pharmaceutical antibiotics, through 3 separate mechanisms operating simultaneously. It generates hydrogen peroxide on contact with tissue. Its extremely low water content and acidic pH create an environment where most pathogens simply cannot survive. And it contains a protein called defensin-1 that actively dismantles bacterial cell structures. A specific variety called Manuka honey is now used in certified medical wound dressings in hospitals across the world, not as complementary medicine, as standard clinical protocol. The single most important word in everything I just said is raw. When honey is heated above approximately 40 degrees Celsius, the enzymes that drive its antimicrobial activity begin to degrade. The clear, perfectly pourable, indefinitely shelf-stable honey in most grocery stores has been heated, filtered, and processed in ways that functionally transform it from a medicinal food into an expensive syrup. The honey that sustained desert travelers, anointed kings, and dressed battlefield wounds was harvested directly from hives, unfiltered, unheated, functionally alive in a way that the commercial product is not. Raw honey applied directly to wounds prevents infection and accelerates healing. A spoonful at the first sign of a sore throat works because it is actually working, not just soothing. Mixed into warm water with lemon, it supports immune response without the inflammatory burden of refined sugar. And here is something that almost nobody mentions. Archaeologists have found 3,000-year-old honey in Egyptian tombs, still edible. There is no other food on earth with that kind of stability. The people who stored it that way knew something about what they had. Number 2, almonds. Sacred architecture built around a nut. When God instructed Moses on the design of the menorah, the sacred lampstand of the tabernacle, the cups were to be shaped like almond blossoms. When Aaron's rod miraculously budded overnight as a sign of divine authority, it produced almonds. The almond was chosen, across multiple moments of theological weight, as a symbol of watchfulness and divine initiative because it is the first tree to flower each spring, blooming while everything else is still dormant. That symbolic choice was made by people who ate almonds every day and watched what they did to the body. Gram for gram, almonds are among the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. A single 1-ounce serving provides approximately 37% of the daily requirement for vitamin E in its most bioavailable form, alpha-tocopherol, the fat-soluble antioxidant that protects cell membranes from oxidative damage. Oxidative damage to cell membranes is implicated in aging, cardiovascular disease, and cancer development. Vitamin E from whole food sources is one of the primary defenses against it. Almonds are also high in magnesium, a mineral that participates in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the human body and is deficient in a substantial portion of the modern population due to soil depletion and processed food diets. Magnesium deficiency is linked to anxiety, poor sleep, muscle cramping, high blood pressure, and impaired glucose regulation. Clinical trials on almonds specifically have shown that regular consumption lowers LDL cholesterol, reduces post-meal blood sugar spikes, improves gut microbiome diversity, and supports healthy body weight by promoting satiety. The fat inside almonds is also partially non-absorbable due to the structure of their cell walls, meaning some of it feeds gut bacteria rather than being stored. Traditional use was simple and daily. Raw or lightly roasted almonds eaten as a regular food. Almond paste, used in cooking and as a spread. Pressed almond oil applied to skin for healing and hydration. The ancient world did not need a clinical trial to understand that this food made people feel better. They built it into sacred iconography because it was that important. Number 1. Olive oil, the ancient world's most complete medicine. There is a reason we start here, at the top of this list. And there is a reason olive oil is referenced over 140 times in biblical scripture. Kings were anointed with it. Wounds were dressed with it. Lamps were fueled by it. The Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10 pours both oil and wine into a stranger's wounds as an act of medical care. This was not symbolism. This was the application of genuine medicine by someone who understood what they were doing. Extra virgin olive oil is one of the most rigorously studied foods in the history of nutritional science. The Mediterranean diet, which positions olive oil as its cornerstone, has been examined in hundreds of controlled clinical trials and consistently linked to dramatically reduced rates of cardiovascular disease, cancer, systemic inflammation, cognitive decline, type 2 diabetes, and all-cause mortality. The primary compound responsible for much of this is oleocanthal, a polyphenol that operates through essentially the same biochemical pathway as ibuprofen in reducing inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation is the underlying driver of most modern disease. A daily food that reduces it at the cellular level without side effects is not a small thing. Olive oil also contains vitamin E, vitamin K, and a spectrum of antioxidant polyphenols that protect cells from oxidative damage. The monounsaturated fat profile is one that the human body recognizes and metabolizes efficiently. It does not trigger the inflammatory response that industrial seed oils produce. But here is the distinction that changes everything about how you shop. Most of what is sold as olive oil in grocery stores today is not the same food the ancient world was using. Commercially produced olive oil is often harvested late when antioxidant content is lower, blended with cheaper refined oils, and processed with heat that degrades the polyphenols that make it medicinal. What you want is cold-pressed, early harvest, extra virgin olive oil from a source that can verify its production chain. Ancient olive oil was a living, antioxidant-rich substance that the body could immediately recognize and use. The best modern versions are too, but you have to find them. A tablespoon taken daily, used generously in cooking at moderate temperatures, applied topically for skin healing and moisture. The people of the ancient world did not take supplements. They poured this over everything, and study after study keeps confirming that they were right to. 20 centuries of accumulated observation, 10 foods. And the same conclusion from every angle. The ancient world was not primitive. It was paying attention. Here is what strikes me most about this entire list. Not a single one of these foods required a laboratory to discover. Every benefit we just walked through, the antimicrobial properties of honey, the anti-inflammatory power of olive oil, the gut-healing fiber of barley, the cardiovascular protection in almonds and pistachios, all of it was identified through generations of direct human experience. People ate these foods, watched what happened, and built entire agricultural systems, trade economies, and even religious rituals around what they observed. Modern science did not discover these benefits. It confirmed them. With clinical trials and biochemical analysis and double-blind studies, it kept arriving at the same place that careful, observant human beings arrived at thousands of years ago without any of that equipment. That should make you think differently about what you put in your body every day. The gap between what heals you and what is convenient has never been wider than it is right now. Most of what is sold as food today would be unrecognizable to the people who built these traditions. Processed oils, refined grains, heated honey stripped of its enzymes. These are not the foods the scripture was describing. They are imitations of them. So, here's the challenge I want to leave you with. Pick 2 foods from this list, just 2. Commit to sourcing the highest quality version you can find and incorporating them genuinely into your daily diet for 30 days. Not as a supplement, not as an add-on, as food the way they were always intended to be used. And then pay attention the way the ancient world paid attention to what happens. If this video opens something up for you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me which food surprised you most. Was it the figs used as a wound? Compress? The pistachios given as a royal gift? The honey that never expired in a 3,000-year-old tomb? I read every single comment on this channel. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button now and ring the notification bell. We post every week and we are just getting started. The next video goes even deeper. You do not want to miss it. See you there.